Hey everyone, welcome. This video we're going to talk about colors inside of our CSS and color selection. Now there's a lot of different ways that we can specify or select different colors, everything from using color names to RGB or red, green, blue values, hexadecimal values, CMYK. There's a lot of different ways that we can actually pick or decide how we're going to specify what colors we want to use for our website. So I'm going to use the demo file that's out in Blackboard for week 8, part 2. I've got it opened up in VS Code, so let's get started. First I'm going to open up my HTML file. I'll do a preview so we can see what we're looking at, and then I'm going to open up my CSS. So basically we're just looking at a summer menu page for the Black Goose Bistro, and currently all of our text values are just in black on a white background. And I've got my CSS open. I'm going to go ahead and collapse my navigation pane. Now as you can see, we already have some styles that are already started getting us going on our menu. But I mentioned that there's a lot of different ways that we can add color. Specifically, we can use color names, RGB color values, RGBa color, hexadecimal values or hex values, HSL color values, and HSLa color values. And the last one I'll talk about is the CMYK color values. Now so far in our course, we've pretty much just been using the predefined color names in order to select what colors we're going to style. This is because it's very easy just to name a color and write it out. Take a look, for example, at our H1's text shadow. It's currently using the color gray. Now there's a finite number of name colors that we can use. Specifically, there's around 140 of them. Let's take a look at a full list of color names. As you can see, most browsers are going to support 140 different color names. And if I scroll down in my list, you can see they're broken down by different shades. For example, here's some red ones, pink, orange, yellow, purple, and so on. Now the syntax that we're going to use for specifying a color name is just to use the actual name of the color. So for example, let's say I wanted to make my H1 medium blue. I would just use the property of color and the value of medium blue. And you can see it changes my H1 to be that color. That's how we would leverage the names for colors to specify our color's value. So I'll move that down in my commented out list. And I've moved my list up just a little bit so we can see it better. Now the next one in the list is the RGB color value. Now RGB stands for red, green, and blue. These are different channels that we can specify combinations of red and green and blue. Because to be able to choose from millions of different colors, we need to have something more than just 140 color names. And right now, computer monitors, pretty much any digital device, creates all of these different colors by using these channels. Take a look at this image. Each channel, the red, the green, and the blue, takes a value between 0 and 255. Now if all channels are 255, we get the color white. And if all channels are 0, we would have the color black. So in order for us to pass in a value for each one of these channels, we need to know what those values are. And there's no way to remember all of them. There are literally millions of combinations available. But we do have some pretty cool tools in our arsenal that we can use to try to help us pick a color. For example, the Chrome's web browser, we could just type in color picker and up would pop an option for us to select different colors. In fact, let's do that. Here you can see the Chrome color picker. You can play around with this trying to find all different kinds of combinations of colors, but watch what happens. If I start off somewhere, let's say in this reddish area, I can further fine-tune my color by dragging and selecting on this circle. And every time I make an adjustment, I'm going to get a new red, green, and blue color combination that I can use. I'll pick something in the blue range. That one looks pretty good. I'll copy my RGB value, and I'll add it to my H1 selector. So I enter in my color property, and then I pass in my RGB value. And I'll use copy-paste just to drop in those numbers that I selected from my browser just a moment ago. And just like anything else, I always want to end with a semicolon, but I'm going to put it on the outside of my parenthesis. So now you can see my H1 is that color blue. There are so many different color pickers out there on the web that you can use. There was even a lecture that I did earlier on where I was showing the developers tools. There's even a color picker in there. So that's the example of RGB. I'm going to go ahead and copy that and paste it down below in my list. Which brings us now to the RGBa color value. With this one, we're using it the same way that we use the RGB, but we have a fourth channel. It's the alpha channel, and that's related to transparency. So where the first three values are red, green, blue, the fourth one is a transparency from 0 to 1. where 0 is transparent and 1 is opaque. I'll scroll up and give you an example of this using the H2. So my property is color, and my value is RGBa. I'm going to use black. So I use 0, 0, and 0, and then my alpha channel I'll pass in for opacity. I'm going to set it to a low number, like 0.3. Keep an eye on appetizers and main courses, because they're going to have a little bit of transparency to them, so they'll start to appear more gray than black. So that's an example of how to use the RGBa. I'll go ahead and add that to our list down below. Okay, next on our list is the hexadecimal values. You might often hear this called hex. You can write the RGB values in hexadecimal format, and it's just using a 16-based number system. The 16 digits are from 0 to 16, and then there's A through F to represent the quantities. Take a look at this image. So this should look pretty familiar, where we have a red, a green, and a blue channel. You'll often see the hex system used because in computers it'll reduce the amount of space it's going to take to store certain information. Most color pickers are going to provide your hex value along with your RGB value, and the values are always going to be preceded by that pound symbol to indicate that they're hexadecimal values. Remember our color picker? You can see I still have the RGB value highlighted that we used to demonstrate earlier for our H1, but notice there's also a hex value. And if I wanted to copy it, I simply have to just use this copy button. Let's go back to the CSS and use this hex value on our H2s. I'll scroll up, again using my color property, and the value I'll just paste in. So our H1 and our H2s are the same exact color, only one's using RGB and the other one is using the hexadecimal value. Let's keep going, but first we'll copy our example down into our list below. So the next two I'm going to cover at the same time because similar to RGB and RGBa, HSL and HSLa go hand in hand, where the A on HSLa is referring to the alpha channel. Again, that's for our transparency. But HSL stands for hue, saturation, and luminosity, where hue is going to specify the position on our color wheel in degrees. So basically red is at 0, green is at 120, and blue is at 240 degrees. So the saturation portion is a percentage value, where 0 is meant as a shade of gray and 100% is the full color. 50% is 50% gray, but you can still kind of see the color. Now the last one, the L, is standing for lightness or luminosity. You can hear it described in either way. And this is telling you how much light you want to give the actual color. If you're using 0 for this one, that means there's no light whatsoever and it's completely black. 50% means it's 50% light, so it's neither dark nor light, where 100% is full lightness or white. And just like before, that alpha channel again, that's for transparency. So we're setting a value between fully transparent and opaque, between 0 and 1. Let's go ahead and target our H2 with an example of the HSL and HSLa properties. We're using the color property, and our value is HSL, passing in 0 for the degrees. We'll do 100% saturation. We'll do 50% for the luminosity. And of course, we'll end it with that semicolon. So in this case, I'm looking at a true red. I'll copy that example into our list down below. And then I'm going to use the same thing to do the HSLa, where I'm using the alpha channel. Only this time, I'll add the little a at the end. So I'm looking at HSLa. And then I'm going to add a 0.5 for my transparency. And you can see that it's really kind of dulled down that red by adding that layer on top of it. So I'll copy that one and put it in our list down below. And that brings us to our last one, the CMYK colors. I saved this one for last because it's a little bit different. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, black. Currently, most of our computer screens and digital devices are going to use the RGB color values, whereas printers most often represent colors using CMYK. But unfortunately, right now, CMYK is not supported in HTML. It's been sort of suggested for a new standard for CSS4, but it's not here yet. So I can't really put a demonstration of the CMYK colors in here. But what I can tell you is that CMYK is based off of percentages from 0 to 100 for each one of those 4 color categories, being cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And there are a lot of different color converters out there that can help you to convert a CMYK color into another color. Even W3 Schools has a color library that allows you to use CMYK with an HTML attribute. Using libraries is a little bit out of the scope for this particular course, but if you're interested, check out W3 Schools and do a search for color CMYK. In the meantime, just think of it this way. Each one of the 4 channels is going to take a value between 0 and 100, and that's how you're going to get your color blends. If I go back to our color picker, remember that blue color? Well, there's our CMYK value for that particular color. So not only can we see it in hexadecimal, RGB, HSL, but we also have CMYK. So that's a rundown of the different types of colors that we can use in our CSS. There are 2 other types of things that I want to cover when it comes to colors. I want to talk about the foreground colors and the background colors, and then I also want to talk just a little bit more about opacity. When we talk about foreground colors, these are the colors that consist of the text color and a border if there is one. And we'll learn more about borders later, but right now the background color is like the canvas behind our element, and it extends to the outer edges of our page. If I scroll through my HTML, let's pick something. How about this dessert section? Let's add some colors to our page with this dessert section. Now in this particular case, we're looking at a section that has a very unique ID attached to it. So if we want to make sure that we're targeting only this section because there are other sections on our page, we can use the ID of dessert without touching any of the other elements. I'm going to scroll up in my CSS to the top of the page, and I'm going to add my style right below the footer selector. I'm just going to add a background color. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy right now. Let's just go with that blanched almond. So now that I have this scrolled up, you can see I have blanched almond on my dessert selection. Let's put a border around it also. I'm going to add a second property value pair to make this a declaration block. Now with a border, we're going to actually use 3 values. This is going to be called a shorthand property, and we need to make sure we're using shortcuts as often as we possibly can. So I'll show you this one right away. When we're taking a border, we need to have 3 values: the width of the border, what we want to have the color of our border be, and what style for our border we're going to use. The actual property is border. And then we use those 3 values in any order. Let's say a green 4-pixel dashed border. Now if we didn't specify the green border, it would actually pull its value from a parent. That color will inherit. Alright, but notice how our text is really crowded up against the edge of the border. It doesn't look that great. Let's add a little bit of padding in there to kind of push it away. Our property for this is padding, and the amount is 1em. That's targeting all 4 sides with the same amount. Alright, let's zoom in on our background color. You can see that our background is filling in between the gaps of the border. Now you can set the background color to any block level or inline element. And background colors don't inherit because the default setting for all background elements is transparent. So you can actually apply a background color to the body, and the color will display behind all of the other elements. For example, what if I added a background color to our entire body? We'll have to pick something different than our dessert selection though. Let's do background color and cornflower blue. Okay, so you remember when we did the RGBa and the HSLa? Well, besides using those color formats, we can specifically say what we want to have opacity set at as a property. And just like with RGBa or HSLa, that is going to take a value between 0 and 1, where 0 is completely transparent and 1 is opaque. So if we gave a value of 0.5 to an element, that's the opacity of 50%. For example, let's add some opacity to that dessert section. Our property is just opacity, and 0.5. So when I did that, did you notice how it affects both the foreground color and the background color of that object? Pretty cool. But that's a lot of information that we've gone over with colors. So I'm going to end this video right here, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.